How to play the E7th chord. The full and correct name for the E7th chord is E dominant 7th. However, when we refer to it or see it in guitar tablature, music or chord charts, it's simply E7th. There are in fact two ways of playing the E7 in the open position. However, we'll be focusing on the simplest one during the first part of this tutorial. Let's play the E7th chord. Firstly, place the first finger in the first fret of the G string. Then press the second finger in the second fret of the A string. Now strum all the strings. Let's see that again with a guitar. Firstly, press the first finger in the first fret of the G string. Then press the second finger in the second fret of the A string, and now strum all the strings. If your E7th chord doesn't sound right, the first thing we need to check is the tuning. So take all your fingers off the strings and then play each string one by one. If your guitar sounds obviously out of tune, you need to pause the video here and tune the guitar up. Otherwise, if you're not sure yet about the tuning, you need to pause the video here and check the tuning with your tuner. Now, let's refinger our E dominant 7th chord. Firstly, press the first finger in the first fret of the G string. Then, press the second finger in the second fret of the A string. Now strum. If you're still not happy with the sound of the chord, the first thing to do is to try playing each note one by one. By doing this, you'll be able to hear which strings are causing the problems. If it's a fingered string that's causing the problem, look carefully at your fingers and check they're between the frets and not overlapping the frets or resting on the frets. One of the most common problems I come across for fingered strings not sounding quite right is that they're just not being pressed quite hard enough. So try just putting a little extra pressure on the fingers and then strum the chord again to see if it sounds any better. If, however, you're finding a problem with the open strings, then your fingered strings must be resting across onto them. Hopefully you'll be able to see what the problem is by looking at the way your fingers are resting on the guitar. If your fingers are resting across the guitar and touching other strings, you need to bring them onto their tips. To do this, you may need to experiment with the position of the thumb. If you move the thumb around the neck towards the floor, this automatically brings your fingers onto their tips and makes the fingers far less likely to rest on the next strings to them. Also, you can get the problem with E chords that the side of your first finger is resting on the fingerboard, and this can kill the top E string. So by bringing the thumb round, it moves your fingers away from the side of the guitar, and this in turn allows your E string to ring correctly. Sometimes your problems can be solved by simply removing the chord and then replacing it carefully. Now, let's look at the alternative or more difficult E7th chord. At this point, many people wonder how or why there can be two chords with completely different shapes that have the same name. Because this lesson is intended for beginners, I'm not going to go into any in-depth detail on the theory. So, simply put, in order to turn an E chord into an E7th chord, we have to add a D note. And there are two places we can add a D to the E chord in order to make the E7. One place is in the third fret of the B string, and the other is just allowing the open D string to ring. Either of these ways will make your E chord into an E7th chord. So let's try and play this second version of the E7th chord. Firstly, press the first finger in the first fret of the G string. Then press the second finger in the second fret of the A string. Now press the third finger in the second fret of the D string. Finally, press the fourth finger in the third fret of the B string, and now strum. Now let's see that again with a guitar. Firstly, press the first finger in the first fret of the G string. Then press the second finger in the second fret of the A string. Now press the third finger in the second fret of the D string. Finally, press the fourth finger in the third fret of the B string, and now strum. If when you strum the chord, this version of the E7th chord isn't sounding correct, repeat the steps we did earlier with the first version in order to try and correct the issues. If, however, you have difficulty with the second version of the chord, or simply prefer the first version of the chord, stick with it. The two chords are equivalent to one another and are therefore interchangeable.